My birth coincided with that of the Tudor dynasty. 1485, when England was set for a century of relative peace under the shrewd and fiscally prudent Henry VII. Not that I knew any different, as one of 3 children to Catherine and Walter Cromwell, an entrepreneurial blacksmith and brewer. My humble beginnings would not take up many pages of history. Who could have foreseen my meteoric rise? Growing up on the edge of Putney Heath, which at the time wasn't the most salubrious district, was pretty unremarkable. Not safe for gentlefolk, notorious for being frequented by highwaymen at night. To survive in that environment took nerve, confidence, a set of quick wits and a pair of useful fists. I had little choice but to acquire the ability to look after myself in whichever way possible. I think it fair to say I was a bit of a ruffian in my younger days. I suppose, given the lack of opportunity for a smart boy like me, it was inevitable I would become a soldier, though surprisingly not for this king nor this country. At 18, I was on the losing side at the Battle of Garigliano, where the Spanish destroyed the French. I stayed on in Italy, given work by a wealthy cloth merchant, Francesco Francescobaldi, in Firenze. I learned much, gained a complete and rounded education, which would later facilitate my progression, not least my linguistic skills. This gift for languages would prove invaluable. By 1512, I was working for English merchants in Antwerp, travelling extensively between England and Italy. My reputation as the go-to person grew, and I garnered much respect. Back in Putney, now 30, I had met, fallen in love with, and married the daughter of Henry Wiggs, a gentleman usher to King Henry. The young widow Elizabeth Williams and I were happy. Within a year, our son Gregory was born. About that time, I had reason to visit the Vatican and met with the man who had gained the most from the defeat of the French in Italy, Giovanni de' Medici, or Pope Leo X as he was when we taught. Little did he know of my involvement fighting alongside the French a decade earlier. I had taken with me a little light reading, a new translation of the Bible by Erasmus. This man had some interesting ideas about religious reform. I then came to the attention of a very powerful man in the service of King Henry, Lord Chancellor Cardinal Thomas Wolsey. By 1520, I was advising the nobility on legal matters and within 4 years admitted as a lawyer at Gray's Inn. The Cardinal appointed me his counsellor, advisor and solicitor. One of my first projects in employ was investigation into 5 small monasteries to establish their wealth. The outcome of that was 29 rather decayed minor monasteries and priories were dissolved. The resulting funds formed the foundation of 2 colleges, Cardinal College, Oxford and the King's School, Ipswich. Life for my growing family was happy and we prospered. I was known for not taking myself too seriously, quite the jovial character. Along with our little boy, we now had 2 little girls, Anne and Grace. I was also able to support my mother-in-law, Mercy Pryor, who shared our home. People liked to visit and we entertained our friends regularly, and it pleased me that I was in such a position as to be able to buy expensive gifts for my Elizabeth. Life was good and we were happy at Austin Friars. Despite my father's reliance on his wits and fists, he'd had the foresight to send me to school, so I received a rudimentary education, learning to read and write, along with a little Latin. Though most of my education had been of my own making, I wanted better for my son, and so Gregory received an education befitting my new status. I sent him to Cambridge. He would be able to hold his own amongst his peers. Our idyllic life was to end in 1529. The sweating sickness was rife. Elizabeth fell ill, then fell silent. Barely had had time to grieve when my 2 little girls too were stricken. It pleased God to take them both swiftly. Neither was this a good year for my employer, the Cardinal. Having failed to obtain a divorce from Henry, from his queen of 20 years, The wolves were now circling the once trusted and loyal servant of the king. Norfolk and Suffolk came for the Great Seal. The Cardinal knew his days were numbered, yet he was amused to see their faces when the wily old fox wouldn't hand it over without making them tarry for it. As the vultures picked over his York household, being not a well man, it was perhaps unwise that he chose then to travel south to face his fate. Stopping off for rest at Sheffield Manor, he became ill. He only made it as far as Leicester. I liked the Cardinal and had enjoyed my time in his service, but I would not be collected in the fallout. I distanced myself, securing a seat in Parliament as the member for Taunton. I remarkably began gaining favour with the king. By 1530 he had appointed me to the Privy Council in charge of his legal and parliamentary affairs. My wise counsel facilitated a swift rise through the ranks. With each position there was a purse, and I held many. Make no mistake, working hard for each. As a low-born man, I had none of the privilege of neither rank nor the automatic right of passage simply because of who my father was. Thus, many resented my rise, not least Thomas Howard, 3rd Duke of Norfolk,